Right, here we are again. This is where we left you the last time. And what we're going to do today is we're going to add an environment around our scene so that it's lit properly. Now, Blender supports environmental lighting, and Cycles is very good at it. So we'll hide our rendered view, and we'll come over here to the world. Now you see here we've got the surface. Do this properly. And we want background selected, which is what we want. There's loads of others. And instead of colour, we want to select an environment texture, not an image texture, an environment texture. I mean, this is still an image, but hey. And yeah, it's definitely colour and all those good things. Now I've got one somewhere that's very posh. It's actually the inside of a church. There it is. That's the one we're doing. And if I turn on rendered view, you can see there we are. We're currently floating in the middle of there, and all these good things would be actually rendered as reflections. Now obviously what we don't want is we don't want to be able to see any of this in reality. You see, there you go. You can go wherever you like. So what we actually want to do is blur it out, and the way that we do that is by using the camera's focus setting. Excuse me, I'll just have to shut the window. There's a howling child outside. That's better. Right, so the way we do that is we're going to blur it out, and the way we do that is with the camera. And if we come down here, we have a depth of field area, and we've got focus, which allows us to focus on an object. Now what we're going to be focusing on is our glass, which we haven't renamed. It's still called cylinder. Let's rename that now. There we go. And you can see that's changed in there and everything else. So we're now going to focus on that, and we want to go into the compositing to enable it. We're going to hit use nodes. We're going to add a viewer node, which is an output, wherever the outputs are gone. So otherwise we're not going to be able to see what we're doing. It's as simple as that. We're going to add what's down as a filter node, which is a defocus node is what we're using, and that goes in there like that. Our image goes into there, and we're going to hit backdrop, and that lets us see what we're doing. Now if we want to control the whole thing, then obviously what we can do is we can scale the backdrop here, and at the moment the zoom is 1. We're going to scale it so we can see the whole thing, and you'll notice it's picked up on our previous render. So what we're going to have to do is render the thing again. What fun. Right, so now it's rendered, we can play about with the settings here, and we want use the Z buffer, so we need to connect our Z into there. We're going to click that like so, and then what we're going to do is we're going to take the f-stop value right the way down, and that's going to control where it is that we start blurring. That controls our depth of field, the area that's actually in focus. And we can boost our maximum blur up, take it down further, further, so now you can see that you can't really see much behind there. We could, in fact, you can go further than that. And that's good enough for what we want to do. So you can see that actually you've got all of these reflections and little bits and pieces in here, making it all very complicated, which is what a glass reflection is like. So this has actually boosted our believability. I'm going to go back into solid. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put a tablecloth on here, and we're going to use the cloth simulator to do it. So I'm going to move my 3D cursor to the origin of the actual glass. That's in the snap menu here, and we want cursor to selected, and then I'm going to add, this is just purely so I know exactly where it is, we're going to add a plane again. We're going to scale it up, SSS, S for scale. We're going to make it quite big because we want our tablecloth to drop down over the top of the table. Surprise, surprise. And in order to do that, we need to set up some physics on this bottom here, which is going to be our tablecloth. We need to set up, in physics, we need to set up for collision, and don't bother changing any of the defaults. It's absolutely fine the way it is at the moment. And we need to create a lot more vertices in here for it to be able to wrap around convincingly. So we need to go into edit mode with that plane that we've just added, and we want subdivide, and that will probably be fine. Now we want to view it from the top, so you can see it's a nice square colour. Now online you're going to be able to find lots of pretty material pattern textures. I've found one which I quite like, so that's the one I'm going to use. You can also make your own. You can photograph a tablecloth. There's nothing to stop you from doing that, so long as you do it dead square on from the top, as if you were viewing it like this. So we're now going to the UV editing mode, because we want to pin that texture to all these vertices. And view top again, because it loses the view, don't ask me why, but it does. And we want unwrap from the shading and UV menus. And we click unwrap, and what we want is project from view, which takes the view exactly as we see it, and we'll project those vertices on here. And now what we want to do is load up our image, so we'll open the image, and I called it cloth something, cloth pattern vintage, that's the one. So there's our image. Now Unfortunately in here you've got no handy handles, so you have to actually use the keyboard, and I'm going to press the S key for scale. So I'm just going to scale it up until we've got pretty much the whole surface covered like so. And that's all we need to do. And that's actually remembered where that image comes on all of those vertices. So we go back to our default view, and now we need to add a material to it, so we'll go back into object mode, new material. It's just a straightforward diffuse, but in the colour we want to click this little dot next to it, and we want to add in an image texture, and we'll open it, and it's exactly the same as we just did. It's the cloth pattern vintage. Someday somebody will actually put in some sort of shortcut to load the UV that you had in the UV editor, but I'm not holding my breath. Okay, and it's flat, which is fine, single image, which is fine. However, the vector we want to be UV. So UV, texture coordinate UV. And if we do a quick little bit of a render now, we'll see that sure enough that tablecloth, and I'm not going to let it keep on, so I'm going to hit the escape key, zoom in on it, and you'll see that there's our wonderful tablecloth. Okay, except it's halfway up the glass at the moment, but we needn't worry about that. That's all going to be sorted out when we've run the cloth simulator on it. So we're going to show hide render view again, and there we go. We go to physics, and I'm going to set the end of this to 60 frames because I know it won't take much longer than that to settle into an acceptable shape. Experience tells me that one. Now in the physics menu for this plane here, we click cloth, and there's some presets, and I'm going to set this. I know it's probably going to be cotton, but I don't like the way their cotton falls, so I'm going to have silk. I'm having a posh tablecloth, and that sets up all these things here supposedly to mimic that material. And we're going to go into cloth collision, make sure we've got self collision, otherwise it won't fold properly, and we're going to raise the quality up to 5 or so. Everything else we'll leave exactly the same. We don't need to do anything else apart from cloth cache, and we want to set our end here to 60 as well, and we're going to bake. And you'll see that you've got a little number on your cursor which is whizzing up, and that's the percentage that it's complete. So this isn't going to take very long at all. And what this is going to do is it's going to wrap that cloth around the table. It'll also drop down due to gravity, so it will be underneath glass. There we go. And you see, you can't actually see it's done it because it's animated. So there you can see it wrapping round, settling into an acceptable shape for a tablecloth, probably somewhere about there. Now, I don't particularly like that composition. I don't, you know, I want to see something else. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to move this glass. I'm going to move it towards the left like that, and I'm going to put something underneath the tablecloth there so it makes a fold. So to do that, I'm going to go back to the beginning again. I'm going to move the tablecloth out of the way so I can see what I'm doing. And I'm going to add a new object. I'm going to add a cylinder actually. Don't want 100 vertices. 16 is plenty. And see, that's where the cylinder's actually gone in. I want to make this sort of a pencil shape, so I'm just going to raise it and scale it so it's kind of like that. And then I'm going to rotate it, because what I don't like is this tablecloth is like far too neat. It needs some interest, it needs some up and down, so this is going to give it that little bit of up and down that it needs. And something like that maybe. And I'm going to make it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to broaden it out. So let's go into the scale, pull the scale across there, so that it's going to be broader than it is high. I'm going to drop it down so it actually cuts through the table a bit. Maybe not that much, need to rotate it a bit more, rotate it back. Oops, rotated it a bit too much. Let's see what that looks like from the camera. And yeah, that's going to be sort of okay. It wants to twiddle around a bit, I think. Something like that. Okay, so now when we run the cloth simulator again, which we can do by right click on there, we're on the physics tab again for our piece of cloth. I'm going to drop it back down before I forget, but not that far down, about there somewhere. And we hit free bake and then bake, and it goes through and bakes again. And this time what we'll get out of it is a more complicated piece of cloth, and this is a good way of actually making complicated shapes sometimes. You can actually use the cloth simulator, you can drape things with this simulated cloth and make some very complicated shapes that would be a real pain to model otherwise. So if we then move the indicator along, and you'll see that, oops, it doesn't work. And the reason it doesn't work, there you go, you see, forgetting things again. The reason it doesn't work is I didn't actually set that to be a collision object. So I've now set it to be a collision object. And we'll go again. Silly me. So yeah, there are a lot of little tricks like this where you can use some of these simulators to do various tasks that would take you quite a long time in Blender. And the next tutorial is going to be about using the fluid simulator to fill the glass up with fluid, and I might very well model a cherry to drop into it as well, which would be rather cool, I think. And yeah, it's very interesting getting involved with these simulation products that are now part of Blender. You see it's taken a bit longer now because the cloth is more complicated. So that's better. So you can see now that we've actually got a little bit of three-dimensional structure to the tabletop, which I like. I mean, I could fiddle around and make it better, but this is good enough to show you what it's going to be like. So the next thing to do, we don't want to have it doing all this shit all the time, so we're going to pick a point where we're comfortable with the way it looks, which is probably going to be about there, I think. Then we go into the modifiers, and you'll see you've got a cloth modifier, and what we can do is we can apply it, and that's what we're going to do. So we've now applied it. So now if we go to the physics panel, it's no longer a cloth object. There's no animation to it, it just stays where it is. And we can render it. So I'm going to render it, and I'll then show you exactly what it looks like. Now what I've done is I've come back in and I've stopped it because I don't know if you noticed, we've actually lost the shadow a bit. This is because we've got a lot of light coming now from the environment, so I'm going to need to boost the amount of light that's going to be coming from our lamp that's up here, the plane that we made earlier, and I'm going to have to do that in order to get the shadow to come back again. So here, instead of 120, I'm going to double it. I'm going to put 240. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn down the actual brightness of this tablecloth as well, slightly. It's probably the best thing to do. There's a number of ways of doing this. The best way to do it is by diving into the materials compositor. I don't really want to do that. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to actually change the image. So I'm going to use GIMP, and here we have it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn down the actual colour on the image itself. Turn it down a fair amount. And then I'm going to resave it. I'm going to call it a different name. Put dim after it. And this is just so that I don't have to show you everything about material nodes, which is going to take a long time. It's going to take more than this would actually allow. So I'm going to go in and reload that, and we'll go again. Let's save the file again first. It's a good idea to keep saving the file before you do anything much. That's a bit better, that's nowhere near as bright as it was. See you in a minute. And so there we are. And that will be the finish of this tutorial. As you can see, you've got a fairly subtle bulge in the tablecloth there, folds. It's quite a good quality render. It's not bad. It's a little bit of noise in places. There we go. We could do with having some table legs or some kind of thing for it to sit on, I guess, but we can't have everything. So next tutorial I'm going to be modelling a cherry to throw into this glass and showing you how to fill the glass up using the fluid simulator. Well, I hope you enjoyed this. Please like, subscribe and all those good things, and I'll see you again soon.